ICQ Podcast episode 367, Ham Radio Tips and Tricks 2022. Well, hello and Happy New Year to you all. Welcome, fellow amateur radio enthusiasts, to this, our 367th episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, supported by our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M0MNG is joined by Dan, Kilo Bravo 6 November Uniform, Edmund, Mike 0, Mike November Golf, Ed, DD5 Lima Papa, and Leslie, Golf 0, Charlie India Bravo, to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin, M6BLY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is looking at ham radio tips and tricks for this new year, 2022. Well, as always, it's our very kind donors that keep the show advert-free, and we really do appreciate the support that you do for us, and we'd like to thank you all at the start of 2022 for your very kind donations that they keep us running. If you would like to help out and show the value you receive from the show, it's a very, very simple process. All you need to do is go to icqpodcast.com/donate, turn the value you've had in the show into a monetary value, and select one of the options or take one of the customizable options and send it our way, and we'd be very, very greatly appreciated. Now we're going to join Martin, Dan, Edmund, Ed and Leslie to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur ham radio news, including Ham Radio Club donates license manuals to local school and a warning over 5G safety. As always, hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, welcome to the News Roundtable for episode 367, and this will be the first News Roundtable we release in 2022. God, boys, 13 and a half years in, we're doing well. Hi. Tonight, I'm joined by Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU. Hi, Dan.
Good evening, everyone.
Yeah, and hopefully you had a reasonable Christmas.
I did, thank you.
That's good news. We've also got Mr. Edmund Spicer M0MNG. Hi, Edmund.
Happy New Year, Martin. Happy New Year, everybody.
Yeah, and you said you had a good chocolate Christmas, wasn't it?
Yes, I don't think I've lost any weight, so it's great to be back on, especially after missing the last episode, so good to be back.
Yeah, good to have you back. We've also got Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP. Hi, Ed.
Happy New Year to everybody.
Yeah, that's a good one as well. We should wish everybody Happy New Year, and I take it you had a reasonable Christmas?
Quiet one, which was what I wanted.
Well, if you got what you wanted, that's the result.
I was going to say, to let the people know what we discussed before we started the recording, I also got various clothes and things that, as a younger person, would have been a bit of a letdown, but actually Christmas presents that are actually wearable are actually very positively received these days.
They certainly are when we have to go out and about, Ed, don't they? And I say, some of your hill topping.
Yeah, it gets cold over here.
I'm sure it does. I'm sure it does. Moving to Essex, where he's backed by popular demand, terrorising the airwaves, Mr. Leslie Butterfield.
When you said popular demand, Martin, were they bribed by any chance? Good evening, everybody. 2022, Martin. Well, I just don't believe it. It's flown by, absolutely flown by. And very happy New Year to everyone, and I hope they got what they wanted. I certainly got lots of chocolates and things to wear and a few good books. So I'm going to be digging into those books later on in the year. Over to you.
Yeah, sounds good, mate. And in fairness, I mean, I remember year 2000 and thinking it was only about 4 or 5 years ago, and here we are in 22. So a lot going on, and we're all enjoying ourselves. Right, let's start with the first news story. A Georgia club donates manuals to local school. Now, this is a US story, so I'm going to ask Dan to go first on this one, but I think it's good news when we sort of give things like this to schools. It helps promote our hobby well, doesn't it, Dan?
Yeah, I like this story too. My only concern here was they didn't use my books. They gave ARRL books. No, it was good. And I think the ARRL actually donated the books. It's just the club itself is the conduit for them.
Yeah, that's a good one. And in fairness, and I know we don't advertise, Dan, and I'm going to put you on the spot here. I wished I'd have had your books when I studied for the American exam. Yeah, I was only aware of them after I'd finished, but I often tell people about them, Dan. So it's not advertising; it's promoting our own.
Well, you know what I'll say too here. If there's any librarians out there listening, I'll be happy to donate the audio, both the audio and the electronic versions to their libraries. Just get in touch with me, and I'll send them the files. They can put it in their collections.
Yeah. Well, as I say, that's an offer they can't refuse, isn't it? Edmund, what do you think about donating books to schools?
Well, it's a good news story, isn't it? And it's something that any of us can do. You don't have to be the National Society. If you've upgraded your license and don't want to hang on to some of your books, you can always approach your local library or your local school and offer them first refusal on any books that you aren't regularly using anymore. Only slight caveat with that: make sure that a brand new edition isn't just about to come out, because I know somebody, no names mentioned, who passed on a copy of the Foundation License Now booklet to somebody he knew, a friend or a family member, something like that, who had expressed an interest in taking the Foundation license exam. And I think it was 2 weeks later, a revised and expanded and updated edition of that same booklet was published. And this person was rather worried that, and it was done completely by accident, of course, you realise. This person was worried that the recipient of the book might think that they were being a cheapskate. But apart from that warning, yeah, it's a really good idea and a good news story, isn't it, Martin?
Yeah, it certainly is, mate. It certainly is. And
Well, though that's actually a concern, because if they donated tech study guides, the tech license, this tech question pool is going to be updated in June this year, 6 months from now, and those study guides will be obsolete.
Yeah, don't do what I did. Oh, I've just dropped the person in it, haven't I? Oops.
well, I was trying to think. I didn't think it was me, Edmund, but I couldn't remember whether I had done something like that. But yeah. But yeah, you're right, Dan. In keeping up to date, I know you every so often you go through a major rewrite of the question pool for your books. There is new syllabuses coming out all the time. So the online versions might actually be better. But what I will say is, in many ways, maybe a caveat needs to go in the book saying, if you've been given one of these books and you need to check the syllabus to make sure you're studying for the right syllabus, but equally, the whole syllabus doesn't change overnight. Parts of it change, but probably 80 or 90% of the book you've got from a previous time will be very valid. So that's where I'm going on that one. I think they're probably still valid. Leslie, what's your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I think it's a great idea. I also think it's a great idea if you leave your magazines in like the local library, the local school, or local dentist, wherever. And if it just gets an extra couple of members each club, that'd be great. It's like little changes, and it gets the interest. I take the point about the new editions. Those changes absolutely drive me crazy. Because as a club, we buy sort of half a dozen books, and you may sort of sell 4 or 5, and then they change the syllabus, and it's like, well, what do we do with this? And the other thing as well, you're right that most of the syllabus is similar, but it does change over years. And I've had one student in, I think about 35 years, asked me what the syllabus was, and that particular person was a teacher. And I thought, oh yeah, well, where do I get this from? And I found it eventually and sent her a copy. But yeah, it's keeping up to date. But the thing is with this, it's about generating interest. That's what thing is all about, and it's a good news story. Well done, them.
Yeah, certainly is. And Ed, do you agree or disagree?
What I found interesting in this article was the reference to media centres rather than libraries, but that fits in actually very well with the comments of Dan that he's willing to supply the digital versions of his books, or as the particular ones, the entry level, I guess. And because that is the world we live in now, the idea of the paper books that age and everything else, whereas a digital book that can be given access to can also be updated very easily if the syllabus changes or the question pool changes in the case of the US. In this case, as we've said, the radio club themselves, the DARC, not to be confused with the National Society over here in Germany, but the radio club themselves organised this, and then I presume they went to the ARRL and said, look, we want to do this. Can you help us? And the ARRL has said, yeah, here you are. Here's the books. You can arrange to get it distributed and put into the media centres of the various schools. And that as a process and a policy and a plan is actually a very good idea, and there's no reason it should be limited to the US. I've always said if somebody's got a good idea and it can be used elsewhere, why not? So you should be talking, or somebody should be talking to the RSGB from one of the radio clubs in the UK saying something similar. Yeah, hint. And yeah, I suppose in many ways also in Germany, in France, in Italy and everywhere else, it's actually a very good idea. And I know Leslie said this before, getting stuff into public libraries, not just school libraries, is a great place to get the ideas out there and to pick up some new radio amateurs or people interested at least in radio and technology. So, hats off to the guys behind this. They've good idea. They've run with it. And, thank you to the Dalton Amateur Radio Club.
Yeah, that's good news. And I always say to people, just because a book's old doesn't mean to say it's not relevant. I mean, while you guys are nattering, I've got 3 copies of the ARRL handbook on the shelf above where I'm recording. There's another one in the shack. I think the one in the shack is 2010. So it's 12 years old. Wow, but there's still some very valuable information here. I've got a 2006, a 2020 on my shelf above. I don't buy it every year. And on my top shelf, I've got a 1987 one. So, and that, believe it or not, is the thickest of all of them. So, whereas, okay, some of the things are different. Okay, I'll give you that. But the basic principles of a lot of these books are still correct. Whether it's the 1987 one or the 2020 or even newer. So, I think what people tend to do, and probably would tend to do with this, is go, oh, that's an old book, I'll throw it away. And you'd be surprised how many ARRL handbooks come up at rallies for under £2. Usually £1 or £2, you get an ARRL handbook, an old one. But I've got to tell you, probably 80% of that stuff is still current. There's a few projects in there with people building things that you might not get the bits for now, but they're still valid. And I wish people wouldn't throw them away or get rid of them when they come to they look at it and go, oh, that's old hat, because the information is still good for schools, libraries, because the basics don't change.
You know what, though? The handbooks are a different story. The handbooks are different than study guides. At least here in the U.S., right? Here in the U.S., the question pools do change every 4 years. And they change, between 25 and 30% of the questions somehow. And sometimes it's just a wording of the question or wording of the answers, but 25 to 30% of the questions change. So you really don't want an old study guide. For sure you don't want one that's 2 editions old. You could maybe pass with one that's the latest, the previous edition. But you don't want to, study guides don't have a long shelf life. Handbooks, however, have an extremely long shelf life. I've got, talking about handbooks, I've got a couple of handbooks from the 1950s. And, it's got a lot of tube stuff in it. But if you like tubes, man, that's the book to have. So anyway, my point is that handbooks are different than study guides.
Yeah, you're right, Dan. And I was getting off my horse a little bit, but yeah, the study guides. Well, you write the study guides, a set of study guides. So I bow to your greater knowledge on that. And as I said to you before, I wished I'd have known about your study guides when I was studying for my American exams. So I think it would have made my life a lot easier.
Having said that, I sometimes get criticized. They say, "Well, man, it's a real racket." I said, "Well, what can I? It's not my fault that they change every 4 years."
Yeah. Well, not your fault. No. So yeah, so great news that the club with the Dalton Amateur Radio Club with the ARRL managed to do this, and let's hope they keep them up to date. That's what I'm going to say. Moving on to our next news story, and nice one, I think, this one. Norway is trying to track down 2-meter intruders. Now, I don't know what this is. Is it somebody who's just bought radios off of an auction site and they happen to be programmed with a few frequencies in the 2-meter band, down near the bottom of the 2-meter band, and they've just gone, oh, what the hell, I'll use them or not? Edmund, what's your thoughts on this one?
I was intrigued because not only does the article not state what the intruders are, but it also doesn't state what they're asking people to listen out for. So my first thought was people getting hold of FM handhelds, but then I thought to myself, well, is that really likely? Because most of the cheap handhelds that you can get off eBay from China and the like that come pre-programmed with test frequencies, most of them tend to be at UHF rather than VHF, and almost exclusively they are outside of amateur bands. And the frequencies that are quoted here are all down the bottom end of 2 meters, and one particularly notable frequency out of those three is 144.300, which is I was going to say calling channel for SSB. It's not a calling channel because that part of the band isn't channelized, but 144.300 is SSB's center of activity. So if you were going to call CQ using SSB on 2 meters, unless there was very good lift conditions, then in which case all bets are off, then you would almost certainly head for that very frequency. So FM transmissions there would be problematic and would also stick out a mile. They'd be really, really obvious. So I thought there are 3 options here. One, it's unlicensed radio enthusiasts who know what they're doing but are doing it anyway, despite not having a license, in which case would they really choose to use those frequencies rather than being more discreet about it and going up to, say, 145 and above? Or is it just random people who don't know that they're doing anything wrong, who are getting these radios from somewhere and just assuming that they're legal and not giving it a second thought? And my third thought was, is it a different kind of intrusion altogether? About 5 years ago, there was a pirate broadcast radio station that was quite strong at my location. I can't remember exactly what frequency they were on, but I think they were down towards the bottom of the FM dial rather than the top. And they trundled along on this frequency without any problems at all for several months. And then all of a sudden, one day, their transmitter presumably developed a fault. And as a result, it was splattering over various frequencies on 2 meters, not a million miles away from the 3 frequencies quoted in this article. ironically, the strongest interfering signal of all was on 144.625, which is the West Sussex frequency that Raynet uses. So I gather that a few emails were sent in to this radio station via their website straight away, pretty much. And within a couple of days, the broadcasts carried on, but all traces of interference on the 2 meter band disappeared very, very quickly. So if anybody listening to this does know the specifics of this, whether it's FM signals or data of some kind, or the backstory of it, where these radios are coming from, who's using them, why they're programmed to those frequencies as opposed to any others, then I would be really, really interested to know the answer. I'm intrigued, Martin. Back to you.
Yeah, fine, Edmund. And say it sounds interesting what's going on down there. Ed, what's your thoughts on this one?
This is a prime example of a badly written article, as in it doesn't provide you enough information to understand what the problem is. Well, you've said the problem is there's an intruder. Yeah, but then we get all the questions that Edmund just asked. So, and there's no link in the article on the original website or on the website where we found it to anywhere else to find that information out. So I can't comment any more than what Edmund has just said. There's really just not enough information here to take this story any further.
All right, no problems there. Leslie, any thoughts on this one?
Well, I'm agreeing with what everyone says, because I looked at this article and it's 6 lines, and it certainly does raise more questions and really not anywhere near enough facts as to what's occurring. And also, if somebody's going to go into the amateur radio bands, they're going to get spotted straight away. So that's my thoughts on this. The other thing I was going to say as well, I think it's sort of very, very important that the radio amateurs report to their national society, and then the national society pass that on to whatever the enforcement body is, rather than radio amateurs trying to get involved. And I know this has happened in the past, and things have not gone well. It has to be the enforcing authority in that country that actually deals with it. And it may well be a genuine mistake, and when they get a tap on the door, we say, "Oh, sorry, we didn't know that," which we have come across that before sometimes. But like I said, and I agree with everyone else, there's not really enough facts in this short article. Over to you, Martin.
Yeah, no problems on that one. Dan, any last words on this one?
I just agree with Leslie that these reports should go through the National Association there. I actually surfed over to the Norway Radio Relay League website, but of course it's all in Norwegian, so I couldn't understand it. But I didn't see anything that said, 2 meters or anything. So I don't know that they even have any kind of news on their own website.
Yeah, might very well be the case. I mean, I remember on the last episode, we covered an issue that 2 weeks previous, I couldn't find anything, and I wasn't sure whether it was a true news story or not. So sometimes when we look for news stories that are just a little bit out of the ordinary, that you're not going to hear on the National Society's websites or broadcasts, maybe we do get caught occasionally with one. But, 2 meters, if we spot something, we do need to report it to our societies and then get them to deal with it, going up the chain. Moving to our next news story, radio clubs band together during pandemic. Now, I like this one because, and I'm going to throw the hand grenade in the room on this one, is this the start of a hub? If clubs are getting together, is this the start of a hub? While we're doing things on the internet, while we've got different speakers from all around the world and all those sort of things, and people joining our meetings from all sorts of clubs, I think this is actually amateurs getting together and becoming stronger. What's your thoughts, Leslie?
Oh, yeah, I love this story. Well, first of all, the one of the offshoots of the pandemic is people are using the internet a lot more, and it's just taken off. Certainly one area is Zoom and the other is YouTube, to name a couple. Chris from the Sutton and Cheam Amateur Radio Club, which I know you're a member of, Martin, when the talks occur, they're recorded and they go straight on to YouTube, which is great because they get worldwide viewing that way. And also what we can do is we can pass that information. I pass it on to my own club via our reflector, and then the club members. And what we're doing there is actually sharing information. I've done a talk myself, as you know, but it really did get the information out there very, very quickly. And the pandemic is one thing, but this is what's occurring as a result of that. And the technology has sort of had a boost of about 20 years because of it, in my view. And it's like, yeah, why not? Just see how it goes. Why not, indeed? I think some of the things we're doing and some of the resources on YouTube for the radio amateurs are absolutely fantastic. You do have to filter some of the stuff out, mind, but I think it's really, really good. Over to you, Martin.
Yeah, no problems at all. Well, later this evening, we have the ICQ Digital Hub meeting going on tonight, so that'll be interesting. It'll have happened by the time you guys listen to the podcast, but yeah, it's like-minded amateurs getting together and discussing issues. Dan, what's your thoughts?
Well, as ham radio clubs have an advantage, I think, over other clubs in that we have the means to communicate with one another. I'll give you an example. So I'm in a bowling league, right? And this bowling league, we had to go from 4-man teams down to 3-man teams because people didn't want to come out to the bowling alley. But our ham radio club, on the other hand, I don't know if we've seen an increase, but certainly we've maintained our level of membership. So, this pandemic is a killer for some activities, but for ham radio, because we can communicate with one another, we have that advantage over other activities.
We certainly have, and I've certainly noticed that on the digital group. As I say, there are a number of people, I'm sure, that live on their own that get a lot of mileage out of being part of a community. And that's what amateur radio really is, a community, in my opinion. So it's nice when things like that happen. Ed, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just looking where this article originally came from, and it's from aureliamatters.com. And so it's a local online newspaper.
It's in Ontario.
Said that Aurelia's in Ontario, but the Barry Club
Ontario.
it's referring to. Okay, because I'm thinking, why isn't that Wales? Because Barry to me is Wales. So that's Ontario. So it's a Canadian story, in fact. Okay. But the story itself, the way it's been written, could be provided to press basically anywhere and everywhere with some slight changes, because it gives a nice short explanation about what the hobby can bring during the times of the pandemic, and and the positives. So it's actually a rather nicely written article that, as I said, could be used in other places to try and publicise amateur radio. I mean, the story behind it is, so as everybody said, we've been lucky in our hobby to be less affected by the pandemic than other hobbies. And in some ways, there's actually, strengthened some of the, at least the online amateur radio groups. So, good on the Barry Amateur Radio Club for doing this and publicising it through their local online newspaper. And, all power to their elbows.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from, Ed, on that one. And don't worry about not spotting it was Barry in Ontario. I mean, trouble is, there's lots of places around the world that are named the same. And I have been to London, Ontario, but in Canada, but don't ask me if I remember much about the place 20 odd years ago. I couldn't find my way around it. But every now and again I get caught out when I look at a name of a place and think, oh, it's here, and then it turns out it isn't. But hey, that's just
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't caught out so much as I researched where it was because I was interested to know what the newspaper was covering, and it's definitely a local rather than a national. But that's probably where we want the publicity to be, to link to the local radio club with the local newspaper, be it online or actually physical. And the Barrie in Ontario, Canada, probably was formed by somebody who used to live in Barrie in Wales. It's all possible. So again, publicity through local resources, be it the local library, as we discussed earlier, or the local newspaper about the hobby is probably a good way to get the word out.
I think so. As you go in there. Edmund, what's your thoughts on this one?
I don't think there's anything I can add.
Are you sure?
The way you said, "Are you sure?" makes me think that you think there is something I can add. Do you know something I don't, Martin? I don't know what to say other than certainly the pandemic has brought existing amateurs out of the woodwork, and a lot of people have renewed their licenses because of work and family life and things. I did virtually no amateur radio at all throughout November and December up until Christmas Eve, because I had Christmas Day and Boxing Day was Saturday and Sunday, and then we had the 2 bank holidays, didn't we? So over those 4 days I actually did quite a lot of amateur radio, and I think it was on the same afternoon on 2 meters, so locally I heard a G1 call sign that I'd never heard before, and I heard a G6 call sign that I'd never heard before. Now, both of those are of 1980s heritage, I believe, and both operators said that they'd been away from the hobby for years, if not decades, and due to the pandemic, being at home more and being furloughed and that kind of thing, they got their equipment out of the attic, set it all up again, revalidated their licenses, and off they went. So certainly my experience bears out what's been said there about people coming out of the woodwork. But beyond that, Martin, I don't really know what else to say. Back to you.
There you go. You did have a comment. And I'm going to apologise to you now, Edmund. I was your part of the world Christmas Day, but I think I'd have got lynched if I'd have gone on the radio. I was down with Colin's brother Lee and family.
Well, you know that infamously I don't do FT8 apart from one contact on 20 metres last summer.
Right.
Well, take a deep breath. On Christmas Day, I might have been doing some FT8 on an HF band. Shock horror. So if you had called me, Martin, I probably wouldn't have been listening anyway.
All right then. Well, no problems at all. No problems at all. But it's a nice story. It's a nice story, as I say, going forward. Now, the next news story. Boeing and Airbus warn US over 5G safety concerns. Now, as we were talking earlier, 2 completely separate companies joining together, competitors joining together to raise concerns. Maybe we do need to take them seriously. What's your thoughts on it, Ed?
Yeah, just to give the listeners a bit of an overview, the implementation of 5G in the US is using some very high frequencies, and the thoughts or the warnings from both Airbus and Boeing is that they could cause people using their cell phones inside the aircraft on the 3.7 to 4.2 gigahertz band that 5G is going to be using in the US, or it's one of the bands it'll use, could interfere with the aircraft electronics. And that is obviously a danger to everybody on board. Now, I had thought that some airlines allowed the use of cell phones on aircraft, but no, they're not. So people should not be having, it's actually against the FCC regulations. People should not have mobile phones turned on in an aircraft in flight over the US. However, if people do, and we know people don't always obey the rules, this could cause major problems for the electronics, and it gives actually the particular electronics, so it's the navigation and other electronics in the aircraft. If people do this, radio altimeters could be interfered with, the Airbus say. Since it's coming as a combined statement from both Airbus and Boeing, or they're echoing each other, I think it needs to be taken as being a real danger. And yeah, the problem is that when is it due? January the 5th, AT&T and Verizon in the US are going to deploy 5G services. They'll start be rolling out 5G cell phones and obviously enabling it on their cell towers and everything at these very high frequencies, at ultra high frequencies. So you're going to get people walking onto planes even in January or February with 5G telephones. So how do you stop any of that? I don't know. You could try and jam it, but then your jammers are going to be causing you problems to your instruments as well. So that's not an option either. I don't have an answer. I just say watch out if people start using the 5G phones on aircraft. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, well, it's certainly a worry. I mean, if the aircraft industry is starting to say now, that's different to the people that wore the tin hats and all those sort of things, and complain 5G is killing their cat or whatever. This is probably a bit more realistic. Leslie, what's your thoughts?
Well, okay, Martin, let's sort of go through this. We have had a court case on 5G in this country very recently that got thrown out. I believe the barrister's name was Mr. Michael Mansfield QC, and you can look that up on the internet. That particularly got thrown out. But as you said, it's down to the Tin Hat Brigade. Anyway, put that to one side. We've now got Boeing and Airbus. Now, they're two major companies in the aircraft industry. And if they've said something, it's a case of sit up and take note. And I would add that they are actually entitled to express their concerns absolutely fully. And I think they're right to do so. Clearly, there's got to be a process between the concerns they've raised and the regulators in that country. So I think it's going to go through a process, and at the end of the process, we see what occurs. But I think it's only the start of it, and I think it's probably going to take a while to sort out. Over to you, Martin.
Yeah, I think it will take a while to sort out and come out of the woodwork and all those sort of things. Edmund, what's your thoughts?
Well, if in terms of a solution, if a smartphone is modern enough that it is capable of operating 5G in the C-band, and C-band, incidentally, was a real blast from my past, because before I discovered the joys of amateur radio, one of my hobbies that I've completely let go in the meantime, unfortunately, was direct broadcast satellite reception, which I used to do in the KU band from 10.7 to 12.75 gigahertz. But C-band, which wasn't used in Europe, but was and possibly is still in the States, was used for satellite feeds to cable head ends and things like that. So I assume that's still going. But hopefully that these phones won't cause any interference, satellite uplinks or downlinks. But going back to the phones themselves, if the phone is modern enough to be able to do 5G, then presumably it will also be modern enough to have a built-in GPS unit, and it'll also be modern enough to have the software upgradable via software updates. So the mobile phone companies, do I mean the mobile phone companies? No, the people who manufacture the phones could they issue a software update whereby if your phone detects that it is X thousand feet above the ground and travelling at X hundred miles per hour, will just simply disable the 5G side of it? Is that a solution, perhaps, maybe?
Well, technology could solve it. I don't know, but yeah, you could be right there, Edmund. Dan, this is obviously has American connotations, I think, because it's from your country and Boeing and Airbus. But what do you think?
Well, being an old test engineer, I would like to see an actual test made and see some test data. I mean, it's one thing to say that, but you really got to back it up. And how do you back it up if you don't run the tests? Otherwise it's just, oh, well, let's not do this in case it might be a problem. So show me, instead of show me the money, show me the tests.
I used to be a test engineer many years ago, actually. So yes,
well, there you
right.
go.
Absolutely
so you know
right.
what I'm talking about.
I do indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a very valid point, Dan. Very valid point. If we've seen this, and the two companies have said that. I believe 5G, from what we were talking about earlier, is not always on the same frequencies in different parts of the world. This is talking about between 3.7 gigs and 4.2 gigs. Yeah, I think we ought to listen, but like you say, it'd be nice to see some test results, some definitive results on that.
I tell you what, if I was a smartphone manufacturer and I saw this notice come out, I'd tell my test engineers, hey, go get an altimeter and see if our 5G phone's affected at all.
Yeah,
it's not just that. There is the word, and I can't remember what the word is. It's you have your equipment. Let's say it's a transmission system set up in a particular way, and that way may itself be in compliance, but you don't know how that affects the other systems. So it's not a case of 2 + 2 = 4. As you put these systems together, it's like, well, where did that result come from?
Yeah.
So you've got to put the thing actually in a practical environment next to the wiring loom and all these types of things.
Yeah.
It's difficult to create reality sometimes.
Coming back on the frequency question, it could be a problem for Europe as well, because apparently, as well as the old 2.1 gigahertz frequency, it's been used for 4G for some time. They will indeed be using 3.6 gigahertz in Europe as well. So 3.6, 3.7, not a lot of difference. So I guess this applies worldwide, not just to the US, in fact. So an existing 5G phone in, for example, Germany that operates on 3.6 gigahertz could give this problem, or even could have already given this problem. It just needs one idiot to leave the phone on or turn the phone on while they're in flight, and you've got the problem.
Yeah. Well, as I say, all throughout history, there's been problems of things that get interference. I used to have to stop my daughter, and I've probably told this story before, completely different, but I used to have to stop my daughter wanting to key the microphone when she passed certain old Land Rover Freelanders because they were susceptible, their alarm systems were susceptible to 2 meters or 70 cms. It didn't matter. As long as you were somewhere near them and you keyed up, their alarms went off.
Yeah, I've got an addition to that, Martin. Going back even further, 2 meter AM mobile would change the traffic lights through the sequence. So you come up to a red light, you can blip it with a 2 meter old Pi AM 2 meter rig, and guess what? The sequence goes around to the next person on the crossing. You blip it again, it comes round to you. So you've got people trying to set off, and then red light already.
Oh dear, that's
interference. The transmitters transmit on the correct frequencies. It's the electronics that isn't protected from EMF.
Yeah, that's like That's like the electric car door openers in the UK, and I've certainly locked myself out of vehicles by accidentally knocking the PTT button and been transmitting and couldn't lock my vehicle. And I've seen people not be able to get in their car when I was transmitting, so and quite legit on 77's frequencies. So we've covered that as well. But yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting one to watch, guys. To our last news story, and I kind of like this one. This is a nice feel-good. Finland's radio amateurs send a gift to Iceland's radio amateurs, and they sent them a nice Morse key to commemorate their 75th anniversary. Ed, I'm going to let you go first on this one.
Yeah, I mean, this is a Morse key that's been handmade by a Finnish radio amateur, and it's a well-known quality make that he makes. And the National Society in Finland sent somebody across, and this got presented to the IRA, the Icelandic Radio Association. Nothing to do with Ireland, guys. And they're obviously very, very happy to receive it. And one comment in this article I really, really love, and I think this may be very true. It says here, Icelanders have a special place in Finland's mind, and when we meet, we immediately find a connection. Courage, independence, and perhaps a little stubbornness, along with a good sense of humour, are qualities that unite us. And actually, if you think about it, Iceland and Finland, weather-wise, is similar. The low number of people per square kilometre in the country is similar. So, yeah, I could see a lot of parallels between Finnish radio amateurs and Icelandic radio amateurs. And it's lovely to have such kind of celebrations and friendship between them when one or the other is celebrating an anniversary. So, well done on the SRAL in Finland for making the effort and presenting the engraved Morse key to the National Association of Iceland. Lovely, lovely story.
Yeah, agree with you totally. It's a nice one. Ed, what's your thoughts? Edmund, what's your thoughts?
You're confusing me there. Well, my only two thoughts are, number one, although I realise that this key will probably be put in a cabinet and put on display somewhere for everybody to look at and admire, a part of me rather hopes it will actually get plugged in and used and put to actual on-air use. That would be really good. And my second thought is, if there's an anniversary in the air, then it's got to be special event stations, hasn't it? Tango Foxtrot is the prefix for Iceland, but I don't know if they can change or add the second letter if it's a special event station as opposed to just an ordinary call sign. So, like, for example, in the UK, we can put the letter B for Bravo in for a special event station. So rather than the call sign starting G and then a letter, it starts GB and then a number rather. So don't know how it works in Iceland, but I can hear them on several different bands, so I will definitely be listening out throughout 2022.
Yeah, that's good news. Now, Dan, you're a resident Morse expert. What's your thoughts?
Well, I'm with Edmund here. I hope they put it to use. I looked up the story on the Icelandic Radio Association website, and it shows the key, and it says the key made by OH1KB will be found in the TF3 IRA telecommunications room. So I would think that get a good operator in there and fire it up. That seems to me appropriate. Plus, talking about special event stations, maybe they could change all their call signs to like TF75 instead of just plain old TF3. That would be kind of cool. Other countries have done that.
Yeah, certainly would. So just a thought there for the people in Finland. Leslie, final words on this one?
Final words, I thought it's a really good story. You got radio amateurs getting on, you got countries going on, and you've got other countries not getting on. Well, why don't they take Finland and Iceland's example? And as for the Morse key, I really hope it gets used, because that's what a Morse key's for.
Yeah, it certainly is, mate. Certainly is. And even though I don't do Morse, I always sell the virtues of it, and I say it's my fault I don't do Morse. Not Morse is a bad thing. So there you go. Right, that concludes our news stories for this episode. Let's find out what the guys have been up to in the month of December. Let's start off, go across the page. Ed, what have you been up to?
I think I've touched on the project I was working on last time I was on, which was adding Bluetooth capability to my portable radio. That's completed. I have a working solution now that allows me to use a Bluetooth headset, so headphones and microphone, and also to control my radio, the Zygo G90, from my smartphone, again, all without any cable. So that's all working. Mark II is getting developed now, which is putting it all in a smaller box. It's in a little bit oversized box at the moment, so needs to be made more compact for portable work. And as always, I've been looking at antennas, repairing and replacing masts because of the storms we've had here in the garden for the home station antenna. And I'm also building a wire Moxon antenna. So a Moxon antenna made out of wire for 10 meters, because we've been seeing that 10 meters has been improving a lot over the last month, a lot with intercontinental contacts being possible for those with some kind of beam. And hence I'm going to build myself for portable use, or I have built myself, I have to test it yet, for portable use, a wire Moxon, which is effectively a 2-element beam that I'll use on a SOTA summit. So that's about it. So apart from that, we've had lots of rain, lots of cold. So there's been less done outside on the summits, and more done in the workshop in the cellar. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah. Sounds like you've been busy and enjoying yourself. Edmund, what have you been up to? I know you said you've done some operating.
Well, yes, work and family life has been really busy these last couple of months, to the extent that before Christmas Eve, the last time I'd really used amateur radio for anything was to help marshal road closures in Worthing on Remembrance Sunday back in November. But about a week or so before Christmas, I got wind that the Worthing and District Amateur Radio Club was going to hold a net on 80 metres SSB on Christmas Eve in the evening. So a few days before that, I got the wire extensions out and clipped them on the ends of my 40 metre monoband inverted V dipole to turn it into an 80 metre inverted V dipole, albeit not a particularly good one, and one that's horribly close to the ground in wavelength terms. And I've got S9 of noise all year round. It's not just Christmas when people have lights and things, nasty horrible switch mode power supplies plugged in. It's all year round. It's S9 of noise, and it's there most of the time. And on the rare occasions it isn't there. The QRM only goes missing for relatively short periods at a time. They tend few and far between. But I thought to myself, on Christmas Eve, it's all going to be local stations, so it doesn't really matter if there's S9 of noise, because everybody's going to be S9 plus 20 or plus 30 dB, which, as it happened, turned out to be the case. So that was quite nice to be able to actually talk to somebody on 80 metres using SSB. But I put the wire extensions on a few days in advance, because the 21st, I think it's the 21st of December, isn't it, was the solstice, winter solstice here in the Northern Hemisphere. So from just after the solstice, which I think was about 2 minutes to 4 in the afternoon or something like that, from roughly then through till about an hour after sunrise the following morning, I transmitted 200 milliwatts of whisper on 80 metres through this antenna contraption in my back garden. And in the early hours of the morning, it went transatlantic. A couple of stations on the eastern coast of the US picked it up. The information was relayed through PSK Reporter, and a certain Bill Barnes spotted that I'd been heard in America. So just goes to show you can't do anything on the air without somebody spotting what you're up to and grassing you up. So that was quite nice, and it's worth remembering that even if a particular band at your location is unusable due to high noise levels, that doesn't necessarily stop you transmitting. So even though you might not have many QSOs, if you're doing a beacon mode like Whisper, you still have that possibility open to you. So I stayed on 80 meters for a little while, and I thought to myself, well, maybe if I narrow down the bandwidth to something much narrower than you would need for SSB, maybe the signal would get through in a way that SSB doesn't, unless it's like plus 20, plus 30 dB over. So I selected a very narrow filter and discovered that CW was a lot more audible and copyable than I thought it was going to be, but also FT8 suddenly became a lot more audible as well. So as I mentioned earlier, I thought I was only going to have one FT8 contact this year, which I had in the summer on 20 meters into Russia. But as proof of concept, I did have about 2 or 3 QSOs successfully using 80 meters, and that got through all the QRM. And ironically enough, one of those contacts was with Iceland. So when they're having their 75th anniversary, maybe 80 meters FT8 will be the way to go to work Iceland. I worked Iceland last summer, incidentally, on 4 meters, 70 megahertz via sporadic E SSB. So from my QTH on the south coast of England, maybe those are the 2 bands that I need to concentrate on. So on Christmas Day, I unclipped the wire extensions and went back to 40 meters and went a bit mad, did a little bit of FT8 on there for the first time ever, I think, on that band. Transmitted some slow scan TV on 40 meters, mainly because I heard somebody else doing it first, but didn't get my equipment set up to decode them in time, and then they stopped doing it. SSTV, if you think 80 meters, 3730 and 20 meters, 14230, those frequencies are quite well known as centers of activities. On 40 meters, I've heard surprisingly little SSTV ever, but I looked at the band plan and there is an equivalent center of activity on 7165 as per the RSGB band plan. So I had a go at transmitting on or near that frequency, but nobody came back to me. So that was quite nice as well. And I even got the microphone out and called CQ. Inter-G was very good because the higher bands were open as well. That meant that the skip distance on 40 meters shortened to the extent that UK contacts were possible. So I've actually spoken to people, shock horror, and the 2 highlights were, number 1, working Golf Bravo 6 Hotel November Yankee, Happy New Year. The Denby Dale Amateur Radio Society are operating several of these Hotel November Yankee stations, and most of them are on the air until well into January. So if special event stations are your bag, listen out for GB and then a number, HNY, Happy New Year. Probably up until about the 28th of January, I would think. They're going to be on the air for a while. So that was nice. But the pièce de résistance was I called CQ, and a chap with the call sign Mike, now I better get this right, hadn't I? Mike 1 Alpha Charlie Bravo replied, and that is Steve, who is a big noise in the RSGB. Is he the general manager, Martin? Do you know? before I say that and
Yeah,
get that
yes,
wrong?
yes, he is. And Steve's
Yeah.
lovely guy. I wouldn't say he's a big noise because he's quite quietly spoken, but I know what you mean by big noise.
So we had a really nice chat, and it just goes to show, in case anybody was under the impression that the RSGB, or indeed any national radio society, is this sort of arm's length, out of reach, separate organisation. If you go on the air and call CQ, you could actually end up talking to the great and the good of your national radio society. So it was lovely to hear from Steve, and he mentioned, he mentioned several things. He was very kind to the ICQ podcast, so we thank you, Steve, for your comments if you're listening to this. But towards the end of the QSO, he said that the thing that he really missed was going out and meeting people in real life, face to face, particularly at rallies, but in general as well, and that he couldn't wait to get back to the days when the coronavirus situation will allow us to meet up with friends and come nose to nose at events and rallies and things like that. And as he was talking, I sat there nodding my head, and I'm sure many people listening to this will agree with that sentiment as well. So I just wanted to let you all know that that Steve, Mike 1 Alpha Charlie Bravo, wishes us all well and sends his best wishes to the ICQ podcast, and I can't wait to see not just us, but everybody in person, hopefully at Newark in September 2022. So I thought I'd mention that I'd had the pleasure of speaking to him, and that he wishes us all well. How about that, Martin?
Yeah, sounds good to me. And I wish the RSGB team well as well. We get on quite well. There's not a problem there at all. Right, Dan, what have you been up to since we last spoke?
Well, we were talking about books before, so I'll go with that theme. I'm in the process of updating my Morse code book. I was supposed to give a talk on Morse code at Orlando Hamcation in February, but I don't know. I don't know if I'll be going. The way COVID is going here, we all kind of thought it was going to be done by now, but if anything, especially in Florida, it seems to be ramping up. In addition to that, I got to get started on the text study guide too. I've got the new question pool, at least the first draft of it, so I got to get started on that. And finally, we talked about handbooks before. I bought the new 2022 handbook. I got an email from the ARRL saying they were having like a Christmas sale on it, and I got it for $40, which was a pretty good deal. And I bought the 6-volume set instead of the one big book because it's getting quite big, and I'm pretty impressed with it. I paged through the construction volume, and they've got a lot of really good information there on surface mount components and such as that. And so I got a pretty good deal on that, and pretty happy about that. So it's books here at KB6NU.
Well, certainly is, Dan, and I love books. My problem is when something happens to me eventually, I don't know where I'm going to have to leave a will where my books are going, because there are some that are, I wouldn't say they're valuable, but they're historical and well worth keeping hold of. They shouldn't go to the pulping factory, put it that way. Leslie, what have you been up to?
Oh, thank you, Martin. Well, first of all, I've got to say that when people heard about me having a prang, I've fully recovered from that. The spare parts were difficult to obtain, by the way, so I jest, but that's all done. What have I been doing amateur radio-wise? Not a lot, because we've had quite a bit on the work front, but I have been messing about with some 2-meter handhelds. We had someone from our club suggest that the nets, 2-meter net, should be a 2-meter net to be resurrected, and he was absolutely right. Thing is, I hadn't used the equipment, that 2-meter equipment, in ages, so I had to dig out my notes on how to use it and get it working again properly, and had the radio in bits on the workbench. Found a couple of Duff batteries, but not a lot as Edmund. And I'm going to pick him up on a point he made about face-to-face meetings. It's very, very important indeed. And I couldn't agree more. When we get back to that scenario again, I'll be more than pleased. But that's all from me, Martin. And I just like to say it's been a pleasure to be back again.
Yeah, no problems at all. It's great to have you back. And I know at the moment, whichever group you manage to join is also dependent on the fact that your shift patterns are a bit fluid at the moment. But we'll fit you in wherever possible, Leslie. No problem.
Cheers. At all. Thank you, Martin.
Right. What have I been up to? Well, not as much as most. This sounds a little bit boring, I suppose, but been working on the digital group. We've done a few bits and pieces. Had quite a few contacts with people, and I'm hoping that this month's figures are going to look good when I do them at the end of the month. I've seen a lot of new call signs that have joined, and I've had discussions with some new people and some people that I've spoke to quite a lot. So it is quite a nice little group to get on with. I have been trying to do some work with Martin Rothwell on getting a Raspberry Pi. This is a Raspberry Pi 4 running Windows 10 to act as the computer running the Wires X software on GB3XP. Now, reason being is, if you get a Raspberry Pi, they draw something like 15 watts of power, as opposed to somewhere between 300 and 500 watts of power from a desktop computer. So there is a cost implication of when it's running 24/7 for months on end. We were trying to do that. Unfortunately, all the software seems to load, and we've tried different software drivers for the serial ports. The devices see each other, they know where they are on what COM port. Will they pass data? No. So we're on almost there. Can't work out why it isn't passing the data, but hopefully there might be something come out of it. Have been to a couple of club meetings. We finished off the year with a couple of club meetings up at Scout Hall. Not very well attended, but those that went thoroughly enjoyed themselves, so that's the important thing. And I think it was about a couple of days before Christmas, I got some QSL cards through the post, which rather shocked me because I don't tend to do a lot of QSLing. And I have no excuse now. I have a QSL card in front of me from a DL0ROS over there in Germany. We had a contact on 20 meters at 8:52 in the morning, and it was an FT8 call. So I have a QSR card confirming I had an FT8 contact with somebody. So, yeah, I know we used to give the FT8 boys a little bit of a hard time, but guys, we all do this and we all try it out. And I'll try things. It doesn't float my boat, but I'll try it and see how it goes. I want to know about it because if I'm standing in front of a class teaching and somebody asks me, I need to know enough about it to be able to confirm and point them in the right direction should they need it. So, yeah, I did an FT8 call. So, not a lot from me, but that's what I've been up to. Right, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining me tonight, and we'll say 73s before I continue with the rest of the podcast. I'd like to thank Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU.
Oh, my pleasure. 7-3 and Happy New Year, everyone.
Yeah, Happy New Year to you, Dan, and say 73s, and great you joined us tonight. I'd like to thank Mr. Edmund Spicer M0MNG.
FT8 will never catch on. Happy New Year, everybody.
Don't you get me into trouble again. But Happy New Year, Edmund, and we'll catch you soon. I'd like to thank Mr. Durrant, DD5LP.
As always, an enjoyable episode, and all the best to all the listeners and to the team at ICQ Podcast, of course, for 2022.
Yeah, I'll say 73s to you, and Happy New Year to you and your family, and yeah, we'll be having a good one. And last but not least, Mr. Leslie's Butterfield, G0CIB, who I mentioned, and just in case we forget, I did tell Denny that I'd say that he said hi to you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Martin. Hi, Denny. Yes, I know Denny very, very well indeed. So anyway, thanks for having me on, Martin. It's been an absolute pleasure tonight, and it's a really good conversation, please. And I remember reading back about they saying SSB would never catch on, so don't worry about that. Just go and do your FTA. Anyway, happy New Year to everyone, and great to be on.
Yeah, thanks, Leslie, and happy New Year to you. And I'd like to wish all our listeners a happy New Year going forward. Now we'll move on to continue with the podcast. 73 all.
Cheerio.
73.
73.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
And now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin M6BOY. Start with news here, and first show of the new year, and the COVID postponements continue to roll here. World RadioSport Team Championships, the WRTC, initially scheduled for this year, has been postponed to 2023. Basically, it's to allow, I suppose, more planning, etc. from there, so, and support the preparations to make sure the event is obviously a success. So they're going to be making some special event call signs available instead between the January the 1st and July the 10th. So we'll pop the information on the ICQ podcast webpage, but if you're on CW, Single Sideband, RITI or FT8, there's an opportunity to work some special events call signs, say, to while the guys are getting ready to move the championship to next year. Keeping the theme of special event call signs, the 50th anniversary of the accession to the throne of Her Majesty the Queen of Denmark is going to be celebrated with the call sign Oscar Zulu 50 Quebec. So Marie II is the head of state for Denmark, the Faroe Islands and Greenland, and she came to the throne on the 14th of January 1972. She became the first female monarch of Denmark since Margrethe I, ruler of the Scandinavian kingdoms, all the way back in 1375 to 1412. So they look out for Oscar Zulu 50 Quebec. And our final special event station to look out for is in relation to the Royal Belgian Amateur Radio Union, the UBA. They're celebrating their 75th anniversary in 2022. Lots of special events have been designated for this that will be active throughout January and February. And each special event station will be using the prefix Oscar November 75 followed by a 3-letter suffix. There's an award for working a specific number of stations in this area here, so lots to get involved on this news story here in relation to the Belgians celebrating their 75th anniversary. So say all the information on icqpodcast.com. Right, well, now we're going to head over to our features episode, and as always, start of a new year, so we've got an opportunity to think about the tips and tricks that we do as we operate our radios and take part in our hobby. So as always, hope there's something for you to pick up here, guys, and enjoy our feature.
And now, what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. Hi guys, for this episode's feature, I thought I'd pass on a few tips and tricks, some of which have been passed on to me recently, some of which are things that I do that you may find very, very useful. So, I've got 3 main areas I'm going to mention today. Number 1's portable operations. When you go out in the field, portable. There are a few things, I've obviously talked about this many times, but there are a few things that extra that we can add in here. Now, if you're anything like me, I had on my old Mazda before I rode it off, I had a mag mount on the roof because the boys, even after I was ready to do it, decided to convince me not to drill a hole in the middle of the roof. So I ended up using a mag mount. Now that mag mount over time suffered from the elements and eventually looked pretty ropey and pretty rusty and horrible. And when I took it off the car, what are you going to do with it? You know, cable's probably not much good anymore. You can take the PL259 off, whatever. But, and this is where I thought would be very useful, if you've got an old mag mount base, why not stick it in your bag or the back of the car? Because if you go out operating portable and you, say, drop a screw or a nut while you're assembling something and it drops on the ground, maybe into the grass or whatever, very, very difficult sometimes to find these bits and pieces. Mag mounts have got quite a strong magnet, so as long as we got ferrous metal, hopefully we can find the device by just running the magnet along the ground and picking up all the metal objects that, and hopefully the one that we've lost. Hi. So that's a little use for it. Now, there's lots of other ways you could do it, but there's a nice little use for it, and it reuses it. Now, one of the things I use when I go out portable is I use reusable cable ties. I picked some up at a rally once. Very, very useful. You can use them as a normal cable tie. Then when you want to undo them, you just push this little lever on the cable tie, which pushes back the locking mechanism and allows you to undo them and reuse them. Now, I find this very, very useful for controlling how I leave my feeder cable. So I tend to roll my feeder cable up sensibly and then put a cable tie around it so it doesn't all fall apart in the car. These reusable cable ties are very useful. All right, cable ties don't cost much money. Let's be honest about it. We're talking pennies. But it's not a matter of that. It's if you want to be green, if you don't want to waste resources, then the reusable cable ties are probably quite useful. Now, when I'm out operating, a number of my tools have got either red tape around them or whatever. I would suggest if you're going out to operate in the field, try and make sure that you put something of colour onto your tools. I.e., you could put some paint on them, you could wrap some insulating tape around them, or whatever. Two things. When you come to pack up, the other person knows it's yours because you've got your tape on it and it doesn't go in their toolbox. And number two is if you drop something on the ground, having a bright colour certainly helps, especially if you dropped it on the grass. So could be very, very useful in highlighting and making sure that the colour stands out from where you are working. Now, I could say this is a tip, but it really is. When you go out operating portable, take a rubbish bag with you. I mean, even if you're good like I am and bring all the stuff home, having a bag to put any rubbish in certainly helps. And it is appreciated by the public. And if you've gone to a park or something, the rangers will always be pleased to invite you back if you leave it in a good condition. So having a rubbish sack with you could be very, very useful. Another thing I find useful, and it's so obvious that most of us forget to do it, take a clipboard with you. When you're out operating in the field and you're trying to write something down or log, it does make it so much easier if you've got a clipboard, a solid surface to work on. And as I said, it's obvious, but we often forget. And the last thing is something we used to do years ago in the PMR industry when we were sending radios out to customers, which we used to mark the antennas by putting some heat shrink sleeving over them and heat shrinking it down, different colours for different areas of operation. However, a small piece of heat shrink sleeved over the antenna and just warmed down nicely onto it would also make your antenna or your mobile stand out if you dropped it on the ground. You know, something yellow or red, something bright certainly could help you find it quickly if you mislaid it at a site where you're operating portable. So that's just a few tips for operating portable. moving on into the workshop. I've had for years a vice that should connect to a tabletop or whatever via vacuum. So you place it on the desk or the table, and you move the lever forward. It creates a vacuum under it, and you can work on it. Lovely little device. However, the vacuum just didn't work on it, and I was almost at the stage about 3 weeks ago of throwing this vice out because it just didn't stick. And just as a last resort, I thought, I don't know, I'm going to try this anyway. I had some wet and dry paper in my toolbox, and the bottom of this vice, the rubber, which is supposed to make the seal, was glazed, had a glaze on it. So I just rubbed it over the rubber and cleaned off the glaze. Had that thing sticks like anything. I can lift the table now without it coming apart by lifting the vice up. So, you know, it may happen to you. It may happen to somebody you know, and you can earn the brownie points for that. But if the rubber seal is glazed on these vacuum devices, they don't always make a very good contact, and therefore you end up not being able to use them properly. Now, the other thing I bought as well within the last month was a small hand vice. For years I've not bothered with it. I've used a pair of pliers or whatever. But I bought a small hand vice, and the idea is you sort of vice it up onto, say, a bit of metal if you're drilling a hole in it or whatever you're trying to do. But there's so many other things you can do with this little hand vice that I thought it was well worth mentioning, because sometimes we struggle without realising what else is out there, and we forget about certain things. Now, the next tip, very old one. All us oldies are going to go, well, why is he talking about that? But I'm sure the youngsters won't necessarily have copped on. When we put screws and bits and pieces back into devices, a magnetic screwdriver is great, but not all screws are magnetic. And equally, sometimes you need to fit a screw into a small hole, and you don't want it falling off the end of your screwdriver. Well, if you're anything like this household, Mrs. B's been burning candles over Christmas, the old candle wax is very, very useful. What you do is you collect the old candle wax, a certain amount of it anyway, and you stick your screwdriver end into the candle wax. So you've got some candle wax on the end of your screwdriver, and then stick the screw on it, and the screw will stick to it, and you can then push it down into a deep hole and tighten up really easy. So candle wax, you may have some over the Christmas period kicking around. Recover some, stick it in your toolbox. You never know when you might need it. The other one I've done, and it works, but it's not as good, is used a bit of the electrical tape, cut a slot in it, stuck the screw through the slot, and then put the electrical tape onto the screwdriver blade so it holds it together that way. But what you do is you start screwing down, and as soon as the screw's got 2 or 3 turns on it, you've got to pull the tape out, otherwise it looks a mess. But just a little thing on the wax there. And reseating screws. So this is one that I gave out some time ago, and I'll give it again. Self-tapping screws. When something's new and a device has been made, if they use self-tapping screws, the first time they put the screw in, it cuts a kind of thread into the plastic or into metal. I've seen it happen in metal, right? If you take the screw out and you fiddle with it and you screw it back in again, you just screw it back in without even thinking about it. And let's say this is a battery department screw. After a period of time, every time it's gone in, it's cut itself a new thread. Well, what happens is there's only so much plastic, so it ends up the screw ends up not being able to fit. So you have to find a bigger screw, or it becomes a bit more of a nightmare, or tape, or whatever you do to solve that problem. Now, with self-tapping screws, and any screw actually, this works as both for threaded screws. When you want to put them back in, if you line the screw up and then give it a turn in the unscrew position, just screw it around in the unscrew position, you will hear it, or you'll hear and feel it drop into the original thread, the original one it cut. And there'll be a little click usually, and at that point in time, if you then tighten up, what happens is the self-tapper goes back into the same thread it cut the first time, and that prolongs usage for you. So just a little one, that might be useful. I did also, going into the shack, I have a Kenwood FT590S, and that radio, obviously it doesn't have a pan adapter and one thing and another, and I like having a pan adapter. So you've got one or two choices, and the choice really does come down to you. You can either trade your radio in and buy one that's got a pan adapter built into it, or you can look at doing something else. Now, I've got an MFJ antenna device that allows you to have two antennas and connected at the same time. Well, one antenna connected to two devices at the same time, and when you're going to transmit, it disables one of the antenna sockets. Now, great little device, and I then have an SDR radio that displays on the screen, so on my computer screen. Now, if you think about it, the MFJ item is probably about $200. Let's keep the numbers simple. Probably about $200. An SDR about another $100. And then you've got to run a computer as well, which you probably got in the shack anyway. But you're certainly looking at $300. Now, it might actually be worth you saying, well, I ain't going to do that. I'm going to trade it in and get a new radio. But if you like the radio you've got and like it, or you've got a spare SDR kicking around, then that could be an option so that you can fit a pan adapter to another radio. And when you're fitting pan adapters to radios, have a look out on the internet and have a look at what the manufacturer says. Some of them have got secondary antenna sockets, so you may not need the MFJ device that I've got. Your radio might be able to support it. Moving down, it's time, this time of the year when it's cold and miserable outside, and we're sitting in the shack sometimes, it might be just worth documenting what you've got in your shack, where it is, how it's all hooked together. Because sure as eggs is eggs, we all forget which bit of wire goes where and what it's there for. So it might be worth just doing a quick bit of documentation and working out where all the devices are. Now, I tend to keep documentation in the shack for all the radios and bits and pieces I've got. However, you might then decide to put them on your shack computer as PDF files, which is equally good. Now, two last things. One, if your shack is away from your main residence, or you're on your own, I would suggest you have a small first aid kit in your shack. Because if you cut yourself or whatever, and you're sort of 200 yards or 200 meters from your main residence, and it's pouring with rain, it will make a lot of sense, just having a small first aid kit, so you can put a bit of cream and a plaster or whatever on, certainly sounds worthwhile doing to me. And the last thing, and I've mentioned this a couple of times before, I have a VoIP phone in my shack connected to Ham Shack hotline. Now, in fairness, I know it's a VoIP service. If you decide to grab an old phone, you can use it on the VoIP service. It's useful for calling other amateurs. You won't be able to call Auntie Flo on it on the Ham Shack hotline system, but there are some nice things you can listen into on there, and it's just an interesting another little toy to have in the shack. So few interesting things for you to have a look at. The Ham Shack hotline you can find out about online, and if that floats your boat, maybe one of you might call me. Hi. Okay, I hope that was of interest.
The ICQ podcast. Come for a moment. Stay for an hour.
Well, everybody, I really hope you've enjoyed our first episode of 2022 of the ICQ podcast. And let's really hope that, say, this year our hobby gets back to being not only a fantastic hobby on the air, but we get back talking to each other face to face again at our various events throughout the year. As always, we hope you enjoyed our feature and hope that certainly has warmed you up with some ideas of things to start the new year off really well in our hobby with our tips and our trips. Right, okay, well, we had our second digital hub meeting group on the ICQ digital group this week. As I say, not as many people there as we thought, but there was some confusion on times, etc. And we're also doing a lot of technical work on that as well at the moment. So, but we really do appreciate everybody, Dad, that turns up, and it's good to enjoy and have the chat with them. And but obviously, we'd like to just bear with us over the next couple of weeks as we're doing a bit of technical work on this project, and hopefully get it nicely bedded down and rock solid for us going forward for 2022.
We certainly are, and as Colin said, I think, Christmas period, people were spending time with their families. I had a lot of people in the UK and across Europe actually say to me, "Martin, I can't make that time." But they were fully supportive that we were trying to make the time for other people in other parts of the globe. So, we are a community. We will try and do it for everybody and treat everybody fairly. So there wasn't as many people as I'd liked, but as I say, most people wanted to be with their family, or they were out because of the timing. So, but it was positive to talk to the people we spoke to. Thoroughly enjoyed that, Colin.
Yeah, and as I certainly agree with that. And as I say, we're doing a lot of technical work at the moment, moving stuff across to our own infrastructure and documentation, etc., on the project. So, as I say, just bear with us, guys, as we're bedding down all the infrastructure at the moment. It is certainly a project we're investing in long term. So, as I say, any feedback in the meantime, drop us a line, let us know, and we'd really appreciate it. Right, well, we need to do some thank yous for this episode. We'd like to thank Dan, KB6NU, Ed, Mike 0, Mike November Golf, and Ed Durrant, DD5 Lima Papa, and Leslie Golf 0 Charlie India Bravo for taking part in the news roundtable with us. And as I say, many thanks, guys, for taking part in this first episode of 2022. We'd also like to thank our monthly and annual subscription donors for helping us pay our way. And as always, if you found some value in today's show, we'd like you to consider us by visiting icqpodcast.com/donate. And as I turn the value you found in the show into a monetary figure and send it our way. And we'd really appreciate, as I say, your help in keeping our show advert free, as I say, going forward. Right, I think that just about ticks all our boxes, the things we need to let people know about. And most importantly, Dad, I really hope you're about to make Mum a nice cup of tea. And I don't know, maybe one of them nice chocolate biscuits for maybe a festive Christmas chocolate box that might still be hanging around in the house, might be accompanying that cup of tea. So, as I say, you should head off and then sort Mum out a nice drink.
Well, I'm about to do that and sort your mum out a drink, and we'll find something special. However, let's be brutally honest about it. I've been fairly busy over the last few days, and your mum has been very, very good at bringing me cups of tea. So we had a little bit of a role reversal, but going into the new year, I think we're back as normal. So I'm going to say 73 to you guys, and go make Mrs. B a nice cup of tea in a minute, and we'll catch up with you soon, won't we, Colin?
We'll do. 73's all. See you in a fortnight's time. Bye-bye.
Yeah, 73.